Did you see that there's like another company that within a week actually was able to copy the new Boston Dynamics robots, kinematics?
Really? Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And when Boston Dynamics found out about it, you know what happened?
What?
Atlas shrugged.
Hey, y'all, it's Dr. Know It All. I am with Dr. Ann Rand. I mean, Scott Walter here. So, Atlas, hey, come on. I had to hit back. Scott literally made up that joke on the spot. I am very impressed with that. Today, we are going to talk a bit about Optimus in the, Tesla's Optimus, not Optimus, the Transformer Optimus, but within the context of the broader humanoid bot arena, because we really haven't seen very much of anything about Optimus recently. But Elon Musk, in response to a question about Optimus in the Q1 earnings call, did talk about that a little bit. So do you want me to just go real quickly through the kind of the facts of the case here? And okay, we'll do that first. So hi. So hi, Scott. All right. So yeah, so somebody asked about Optimus, and Elon responded that that it's doing simple factory tasks in the lab right now. So it's doing pick and place or something like that, but not in a factory. So it's doing it in the lab. Optimus should be in production in a factory by the end of the year. So that would be by the end of 2024. And then he specifically said sell externally by the end of 2025, which might blow up some people's theses about how exactly Optimus is going to roll out. He then reiterated that it will be more valuable than everything else combined that Tesla is doing. And Tesla is best positioned to make any best position of any to make a hit volume production. Sorry, I typed that wrong. I'm reading my really bad typing. Anyway, and then also so they can do volume production. Sorry, the TLDR about that. And then a really huge statement was that they will be able to do entire inference on the bot itself, which is a little bit like, yeah, of course we should probably know that, but it's really good to hear that, and we'll get into exactly why that matters. He then went on to kind of expand on things a little bit by saying Tesla's AI inference efficiency in their cars, as well as in Optimus, is vastly better than anyone else's, and this really matters. I said this really matters. That's not what Elon said. But and then by virtue of having to do mobile compute in cars, it's become very efficient, and then this positions them amazingly well for the embodied AI future. He said that, and I have to, of course, represent embodied AI, the year of embodied AI. So yeah, I wore the shirt on purpose so I could say that. And then he talked about regulatory approval for the car, which we might actually fold into this discussion because there is an interesting question about how you get regulatory approval to utilize a humanoid bot as well. So a lot of stuff there. So where do you want to start?
Well, let's first start. You said, somebody asked a question. It wasn't somebody asked the question. That was like one of the questions that came from Say. So that means the shareholders voted on that question, and that was like the number 2 question. Yeah. So that shows it's a certain amount of importance, because I think sometimes the Optimus questions came a little bit later, and sometimes we weren't even sure it was going to be high enough in there to be asked. Right. So it was let's say a better answer than we've had for a while to get an idea of the timing. When you talk about the laboratory, I think he talked about that they was doing the same kind of tasks. So it seems like they've duplicated some of the factory floor setups in the lab for them to be able to do the testing there rather than actually doing it on the floor. I would be expecting they would do it on the floor off hours, but it may just be logistically difficult. I mean, still 45 minutes to an hour away. You have to move the bots back and forth or leave them there overnight and wait for the shifts to be over. And the question is, which line are you using? Are you using a line that's trying to run 24/7? You don't want to do that. So you'd have to find lines that maybe are only doing 1 or 2 shifts. So maybe the utility of doing it down there was not as good as actually doing a laboratory setting up in Palo Alto, where you don't need to duplicate the entire production line. You just need to be able to sort of duplicate the process that you plan on doing. And that happens all the time. This is exactly what these design shops do, is that they're building like the little mock-up and everything else, and not the entire line, but just a part of the line that's going to get plugged into it later. And so they certainly would have the skill set to be able to do it, and means they're getting ready to ramp up. So there's still good promise that it will be starting to be used in production in the fall. And that's about the timeline that we're sort of hoping. The question is like the number, is it really going to be useful work? I think he sort of indicated it would be kind of useful work and not just laboratory kind of stuff, because if you're still doing laboratory stuff, you're still going to do it in the laboratory. When you're ready to bring it down there, you are. The question really comes down to scaling. He didn't quite address that, let's say indirectly, because we sort of got the indication from talking to the various CEOs of these other robotic bot companies that they feel like you have to nail the design down first before you start scaling it too much. And they realize it is important. You can only do so much in simulation at some point, and you need the real world, and you need then to be able to scale up. And that's why part of the reason some of them are holding back, and the others is that they may not have the ability to scale quite that easy. So it's possible these other companies can produce a couple of dozen within a year, and maybe the year after that, close to 100 or something like that. But I think at this point that if Tesla wants to, they could probably crank out a fairly high number of them pretty quickly, if just for the training.
Right.
And so if you get a good number of that, and you get the training, and then with that number, you can start deploying. Now, well, let's remember what Tom Zhu said, that when he was talking about the number of workers and bots he would need for a factory, it was like 5,000, which sounds like a large number. It's like, oh my goodness, 5,000. Well,
yeah,
I mean, that's about the number of what Model Ys that are produced in a month at Giga Texas. Okay. So I think it's like around 1,000 a week or something like that. Or, you know, it's basically the order. It's like it's not a huge number of vehicles, or 5,000 may seem like a lot, but it's really a not. But if you're setting up a production line that can start cranking them out, are you going to spool it up and then turn it off? So at some point, once you meet your internal demand, what do you do with the excess?
Yeah.
And that's why they may be saying that they're looking at next year, then being able to start selling it, which is a bit of a surprise. It kind of goes in with the idea of, Elon talked about it being a product a few times, and that maybe they aren't going to use a RAS model, but I would expect that they are. It's still that expectation that they would do something like that.
Well,
but, maybe they're really talking about selling.
Saying sell to, it's an answer to a question, not a prepared statement. So saying sell could mean leasing or something along those lines. So more like a robot as a service, but he did say sell. I mean, that's
most software companies don't consider
it's,
they're doing SaaS models.
Yeah.
And they have like a sales team, and they talk about, I just got the sale the other day.
Right.
They so it is one of those terms that could mean literally selling or leasing or something like that, or selling a subscription. I mean, that's basically what you're talking about. So it could still be there, in which there's wiggle room on what they decide to people do with it. Right. So that's one interesting aspect. So there's another I wanted to ask you about that I think you were inferring about a little bit as you went into it. And again, that's my pun. That I already kind of ended up riffing on this on Randy's, maybe like stepping a little bit on a limb. But what Elon was saying is that they do have a lot of advantage in scalability and manufacturability, and he was really proud of the chip. The FSD chip and the inference chip. And the reason is that because they're so sensitive to energy usage, and it was going in the car, they had to design a chip that was extremely energy efficient. And they believe that's going to be one of the advantages they have going into Optimus, is that like all the inference is there and it doesn't require a lot of energy. Now, I don't know how much energy the NVIDIA chips use, but if they weren't really designed to go in a humanoid bot, they may not be that concerned about how efficient it is from an energy budget standpoint. And Optimus is trying to live within an energy budget of 500 watts max. Not always at 500 watts, but really that's going to be the maximum. And if you've got an inference chip that's eating up 200-300 watts of that, not a whole lot left over for the actuators. Yeah. And my understanding is the inference chip is probably under 100 watts, and it may be like in the order of 75 or something like that. Right. So.
We can take some guesses, because we know, so hardware 3 we know operates at 100 watts max.
And is that one or two?
That's there's two chips. That's two chips.
Two chips. Right. It's like that could be 50 then.
So if we cut it in half, that's about 50. We also know that hardware 4 is substantially higher than that. We don't know exactly, but 200 watts max. It's below that. So, we're probably looking at somewhere between 70, because you have to cut it in half, because there's two chips on a full self-driving computer. So cut that in half, cut the power approximately in half, 75, 80 to 100, somewhere in that range. So, it's still 20% of the energy budget, but considering it's brain.
Yeah, but you still want to get it done. I mean, 200 seems like a lot for me, because that could really hurt the range in your car when you're using FSD. If it's using that much. So you would want it to be a little bit less. So. Right. Okay, we don't know, but we know they talked about the idle state for Optimus to be around 100. And I don't think that means like the inference is completely stopped at that point. Part of it is inference, and part of it might just be actuators trying to sort of like hold you in position, because the actuators. I mean, if you turn the power off, then the whole thing's just going to slump and fall down.
Yeah,
So there's always a little
we
bit
actually
of
saw that
energy
sad little thing with Digit when it ran out of
Yeah,
power and
yeah.
it just collapsed.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
I mean, think about it as a human being. You know, you are standing up. If you're standing still, you're still using a lot of motor control, so you're
Mhm, mhm.
burning energy.
Yeah.
And if you've ever seen a person faint, you see exactly what happens when you stop exerting muscle control over.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Um,
Yeah, that was rather interesting. He feels that is a huge advantage that they will have.
Well,
The
I'll tell you another. Okay, so just I haven't got Rabbit in my hands yet. I really, really want the Rabbit R1. Matthew Berman just got one, and I don't know how he got it early. Anyway, but even between the opening and between his demo and all that stuff, it's like, you know, same thing as if you ask SIRI or ALEXA, which I can't do or else they'll talk to me right now. But if you say those words and you ask it a question, there's this delay of 2 or
oh,
3
you're talking about
seconds.
Alexa?
Yeah. Yeah, I have my headphones on, thank goodness. So yeah, I know, otherwise you would have got me. But you know, but there's this 2 to 3 second delay between everything you want to do with these because it's going to the cloud, it's inferring in the cloud, and it's coming back. And if you have a delay in your setup at home, the Wi-Fi goes out for a second, the server cluster is just busy because a lot of people are hitting it at the same time. All that stuff will add delays. When you have an onboard inference chip, and this is obvious that they had to do this with full self-driving because, you know, the car can't ask the internet what the right answer is. It has to know 30 plus times a second. It has to know exactly what the next thing to do is. So it has to be making those decisions in real time. So, but the advantage of that is that not only will Optimus be using its own onboard stuff to infer, so it'll be moving through space that way, but when you talk to it, when you have any kind of interaction with Optimus, it will be instantaneous. It will be like talking to
Mhm.
a human, not like these devices that we're used to right now, where there's this constant like delay buffering while it's waiting to, like, you know, answer.
And it's
That's a big
most
deal.
likely going to be Grok. Now that wasn't talked about. I
Yes.
don't think Grok was brought up at all in the earnings call, was it? But there were some posts a little bit early before talking about that. And last week they were talking about the multimodal Grok. Now,
Yeah.
do you think how is it was looking at images, right? Is there a version of Grok that also takes voice input? And do you think that voice input is that the voice gets converted to text and then text goes in there, or do you think it's like
Right.
voice straight through?
Well, I know from ChatGPT that they use Whisper, which is their voice to
Yeah,
text,
yeah.
and then it goes to text, and then, but that's pretty fast. So I don't think it's going to be a problem. I don't know that
But
Grok
why
has
isn't there
a
like an
direct-
end to end for that? Why does it have to go to text and through there? Is there
I
any
don't see
advantages
why
to
it
that?
couldn't. I don't know. Maybe Grok will end up doing that. Maybe they'll skip that part
Yeah,
because
I
if they're
would. I,
planning on
I would
doing a
hope
lot
so
of
because
inference only. Yeah.
I've always seen that as slow when I had at first trying to do those things. In fact, you know,
Right.
you got to get the text back from the internet,
Right.
and then you get the text, and then you parse the text to try to figure out what the
Right.
next thing was supposed to be that you
Yeah.
wanted to do, and that was rather annoying. And then if you wanted to then vocalize the output, you then had to have some speech synthesis, and all
Right.
those steps were kind of slow. And we saw that a little bit in the figure demo because
We can also,
they
yeah.
were
Oh
going to
gosh,
the
yeah.
internet
There's
to be
some
able to do
long-
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also
you
just
saw
think
it.
about a bandwidth issue. If you could,
Mhm.
even if you did the answer to the question online, if you could just do speech to text locally, then you're sending a tiny little packet. You know, the text is tiny. So, right, you know,
Mhm.
asking a question like how tall is the Eiffel Tower or something takes that's like a kilobyte and kilobit. It's a few
Mhm.
bits. I mean, it's not that much. But if you ask that question and you send an audio file, the audio file is substantially
Huge.
larger. So you really, really would like to at least be able to do text to speech to text and text to speech locally, even if you were doing everything else
Right.
in the cloud.
Now,
Yeah.
now there could be sort of another advantage to it in that I think it was sort of brought up. I'm trying to think it was Jonathan Hurst or some others were talking a little bit about that. The need to have like the commands interfaces to Digit done that way just for sort of compliance when you're in a factory floor setting to make sure you understand what it's going to do, which is the
Yeah.
reason why you end up seeing that list of it's actually thinking out loud of like,
Right.
this is what I plan on doing. So in many cases, they're trying to split it out. And it could get difficult if you go end to end it's really hard to say, well, what are you really thinking? Can you tell us what your
Right.
plan is so we can verify that the plan you're doing is a safe plan and adheres to all the, whatever the standards and procedures that we have for execution.
Right. Yeah, I mean the most interesting thing to me and the new knowledge, but again, it's not that new. It's just because they told us, but the fact that it's doing everything pretty much locally. It's doing all of that inference that it changes the metrics. So let's just take, I mean, just take Figure, because I did that demo. That was a good
Mhm.
counter example. So the bot itself clearly is not thinking, but doing the actions locally, right? So they've got some sort of chip. And I would imagine eventually they will probably try to integrate some
Mhm.
version of
It's going to be local.
ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Yeah. But currently what happens is you're asking it a question, you get this big delay as we've got all the back and forth, all that stuff, and then it begins to act. But not only is there a big delay and everything, but that causes I don't know. I've heard arguments that it's more efficient to do compute in the cloud because you can do it in giant data centers and stuff. But you know, you're creating multiple points of failure. If you've got a bot and the chip is working and all that stuff, and you're doing everything locally, all the inference and everything, there's only a single point of failure. It's just the bot, and the bot will work. It should. But here, if you're doing something
Mhm.
non-locally, you've got the bot, you've got the internet connection, you've got the other end's internet connection, you've got the server cluster, you've got how busy is that thing? Is there a fault in the server cluster? All of these things stack up so that you could end up with a problem. And imagine in a situation, you can't have this in a factory. You definitely can't have it driving. But even in a
Yeah.
factory, if this thing's working and somebody asks it a question and it's in the middle of doing work, it can't like sit there for 5 seconds. It could be quite dangerous for it to do that. So it's
Yeah.
got to be
And
able to do inference,
it's
real time.
also a really noisy environment as far as
Yeah, yeah.
communication
So
in there.
they're
And
just
I'm not talking
difficult, right?
about sound noise. I'm not like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
electromagnetic noise and everything else. You've got so much going on that you could have a lot of loss in transmission going on. But
Right.
I guess that's the other thing is that if your inference requires a lot of energy to do, then it makes
Right.
sense to offload it because you don't have enough then there in the body to do it.
Well, yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying. The energy
So I'm
budget
saying, is like,
becomes high.
imagine your
Yeah.
inference requires like 1,000 watts.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
No,
then
no. Yeah.
then
You
we have
can't
to
do
do
that.
it offline or something like
Right.
that. But
Right.
again, you talk about the multiple points of failure, or like in this case, like a single point of failure.
Right.
This reminds me of the Harvey Mudd episode in Star Trek, where
Right.
they had the one android. Was it Herman?
Right.
I think is his name, and they all had to do was get him to go down, and all the others went down. And so
Right.
that's the exact
Exactly.
same scenario here. Is that if something happens at that point, then everything else won't be able to operate. So you
Right.
do want them to have a certain amount of local autonomy to be able to figure these things out, because
Yeah.
you're not guaranteed to always have a strong internet connection.
Right. And I'll raise another significant issue. This is not such a big, well, it could be for Tesla itself too, but no, I think in general. So let's say you're BMW and you have your Figure robots coming in, and the Figure robot communicates with OpenAI about every single thing that these people are talking to, and it's going back and forth, all sorts of stuff. What are you concerned about as BMW? That's a lot
Privacy.
of potential proprietary data that you do not want to be sharing with another company. Suddenly you're exposing yourself to potential security stuff, but also just data privacy. You might be like, look, this is like a new secret project we're working on the next I-12 or something, right? And it's like, we don't want people knowing about it. And suddenly, in order to utilize the bot, you're having to then and we've talked about this with our human bots company, right? This is a major issue with fleet management, with all sorts of things when you introduce third parties into these systems, that you have to be careful about that.
And think about it. If somehow what it's observing is making it into its neural net, it doesn't really remember where it comes from.
Right.
It'll just blurt it out later, right?
Yeah.
Not realizing that's a trade secret. You weren't supposed to talk about that.
Yeah.
So
or I
best
mean,
thing is-
it just gets thrown into the training data. Let's say that you've got dumb lawyers, right? And so I don't think BMW has dumb lawyers, but I'm just saying you have dumb lawyers that don't check the thing. OpenAI's contract with you says we get to use all the data to do our training, and we can suck it all in. Even if they don't use it intentionally to sell something, I could then come to the bot later or come to ChatGPT. I'm just using it online and say, hey, ChatGPT, what's this about the new I-12? And it's like, oh, well, let me tell you all the details. It's like, it's just got it in its memory.
Well, it could be other than that. Maybe there's like some particular technique you use to fasten something on there that is like really revolutionary. You don't want to know. And the bot's been trained on that.
Right.
And suddenly it sees sort of a similar thing, and they're trying to show something else and go, wait a minute, and it just goes and does another one. It's like, wow, where'd you come up with that? It's a great idea. So that's what I'm saying is it will be really hard, because you're already seeing these artists that are complaining about, it's like, wait a minute, it's stealing my works here because it's inspired by everything else. So I could see that being an issue.
Yeah. So I would imagine that everyone But here's the problem. So I think Grok has been built from the ground up because of Elon and everything. It's probably been built from the ground up with the idea of being utilized in a mobile environment.
Mhm.
And we can see that the data that it's training on from those multimodal examples, some of them were car things that were clearly from Tesla's, their information. So it's been built that way, but ChatGPT very much has not been. It's designed to run in a very large data center. So how do you cram that into a 100-watt power envelope with only 8 gigs of VRAM? You start like reducing the amount of space this thing has to work inside itself. It's doable. I mean, clearly we see like Llama's 8 billion parameter model that you can quantize down to something like 2 gigabytes of RAM. And and you're not going to have you're not going to ask your bot to compose you some sort of sonnet or something like that. It's pretty directed, and it doesn't have to be great, but it just needs to be able to get basic human, words across. It's just like, yes, can you communicate with me in a reasonable fashion and understand things in a reasonable fashion? It doesn't have to be the best, but that's where you could have a multi-tiered system. Again, with the proprietariness issue being a problem, but you could see like, okay, I can handle most requests here, but if somebody does for whatever reason on the factory floor say, hey, make me a really funny joke about something, and it doesn't know, it could then go to the cloud, get some information
and get that if necessary, right? If you're going to be using Star Wars references and telling it what to do,
right? Exactly.
So does it need to have it locally or not?
Right.
I think that'll be pretty interesting. See, trying to think of anything else in that very long answer that he gave. I think we've hit most of those points. The important
the most more valuable than everything else combined.
Which
and that they're best positioned to hit volume production. I think that was hitting back at a lot of these companies. That's
the main thing. I mean, that's not something new coming from Elon. It's also not something new coming from everyone else. Is that the past 2 weeks has been a lot more announcements coming from the other bot manufacturers, and you start reading their interviews and listening to them. They all again keep on talking about how it's just this huge TAM, the difference between automotive, and even CERN had a pretty good post today where everyone thought that it's going to be like the EV market. You're going to have a lot of these companies going bankrupt. So they're going to have some, but the ones that going to go bankrupt is because they were probably either poorly capitalized or poorly run or something like that. It's not because there's only so much room. It's like, this is huge. You're not competing against ICE. You're competing against a market that's completely new.
Completely different environment too, because the EV1 was coming in against a huge ecosystem of gas cars.
Yeah.
And it still was highly competitive. I think people who had one loved it, but we're looking at a completely
new market. And you're looking at them going for very different segments, very different ways of going in there. And I think maybe we should have a weekly segment called, them's fighting words, because as we know.
Oh, do you want to talk about that? Yeah.
Well,
I just want to mention, speaking of niches, before we move on to that, I want to call up our recent, the EVANNEX talk that Brian.
Yes, which will be pertinent to the second one I'm going to come up to here.
Okay, let me bring this guy up to the stage because here we go.
Yes, okay.
Them's fighting words.
So basically, we're going to have to do something, one of those little segments.
I know. It needs to be like a thing that's like two boxing gloves.
It needs to have some music to go along with it as well. Yeah. So the last, we talked about Boston Dynamics last week, but it basically was a hot take. And I did what I always do is I make puns about something, and I just posted something because I noticed the similarities between the figure waste and also the Boston Dynamics waste, and just put, what did I say? They didn't waste any time on this design. And just compared the two next to it. Well, Brett Adcock noticed that, and he was a bit miffed by it. He said it won't be the first time they copy. And if you go a little bit further down there, he says it's patented.
Right. So I just want to make a note here real quick. This is very close to 1 million views, and I'll leave a link to it in the description. So you can just push it over 1 million views here. So it was
kind of surprising. I put it out there. I didn't expect it would actually create news. I wasn't aware that it was patented or even patentable. So that's one space to kind of look at. So you can kind of see that there's, I wouldn't say bad blood, but let's say there's a little bit of competition going on there. And then we've had, the pleasure of being able to interview and really the honor to talk to a lot of these other bot companies. And you and Herbert got a chance to talk to Bernd Bernick, and I did a few days later with Marva and her Soft Robotics podcast. Yeah. And I had the advantage of knowing the answers to some of the questions that you asked. So I was able to come up with, I think, some other ones there. the TLDR of that is that he's going for a completely different market. He's going right to the consumer home market.
Which is
he's
fantastic.
looking for a bot that's going to be really low cost and low mass. Right. And he's really convinced he's going to do it. And for most people, it's like, wow, that's crazy, because I've always used the analogy that FSD is a really easy solvable problem on the test track. It's, it's like where everything is kind of known, and the factory is like a test track. You can get the stuff to go. But getting FSD to work in the real world is very difficult. So getting the robot to work in households where every household is a little bit different is a lot different. And most people would say you're absolutely insane to do it. And if you actually talk, or listen to, I listened today, I think it might be an older one, but it was just re-put out by ARC, their interview with Brad Adcock, and how they're focusing kind of on logistics and, moving boxes and kind of these very low hanging fruit, because there's just so much there. It's just such a large market. It's like, we'll be able to do it. The others will also be able to work in that market, and we won't even see one another because there's just a lot of work to be done in there. And they're not even looking at the consumer market for that.
Right.
So
and this, by the way, is EVANNEX's Neo, just to point that out.
Right. That's where Brent. Yeah. Now yesterday,
but also agility. I was in a presentation / conference thing they did for logistics, and they are dialed in about moving totes and boxes.
Yes.
So
the
that's
same thing.
That's again. So we're segmenting the market right from the get go here.
And
this is a consumer market. And look, I mean, that's a good consumer bot. It looks like something that I would be comfortable having in the house, and I wouldn't be afraid that was going to, crash.
Now there's totes and all these other things, but and there's a lot of movement of that around to build boxes, and then something like there's 1 trillion boxes that are moved around the world every year. Okay, that's a trillion. So I'm just like, wow, there's an awful lot of that has to move around. So it's a big TAM. That's why we say that you don't have to worry about these bot manufacturers going out of business. If they go out of business, it's because they were poorly run. That was it. Right. It's not because the competitive pressures put them out of business. If they know how to run it correctly, they'll be able to do it. Gordy Rose has been pretty active on X recently, and yesterday Sanctuary announced their next generation, their Gen 7 bot, which is like another version of Phoenix. And Gordy's been talking a lot about embodied AI and AGI and stuff like that, and his feeling. And he had an interview with Digimeca, I think, however you would spell it. And so it was a rather interesting set of back and forth. And one of the final questions was, so is Elon Musk on the right path with Tesla's Optimus humanoids, which some reports suggest could be on sale before the end of the year? Rose laughs and says, anybody who tries to take a technology like this and penetrate the home with it first is going to flame out and die. That is a terrible idea. Okay. So again, coming back to them's fighting words, because he's saying that, we get Bernd saying something else. Exactly. And we just get to kind of observe this whole fray that's kind of going on.
Right. I just want to point out that is it Gordy or Jordy? I don't know. How do you say his name?
I think it might be Jordy. We'll find out when we interview him in 2 weeks.
The number 2. This is number 2 of his posts. I just happened to notice this was you and Herbert, so that's pretty cool. But anyway, there's Phoenix Gen 7, so that's actually really awesome that he just reposted that.
Yes. So we tried to do a quick breakdown on what, we got a little bit of information yesterday and a heads up that the press release is coming to get an idea. And it sort of shows that they're all moving ahead. They're all taking it very seriously. They all are seeing different ways of approaching the market. And, some of them might think, if if he really thinks he can get it in the home market, he's really got something to go there. Okay, try it. There's nothing wrong with it. But everyone else may say, no, we're seeing something that's very difficult. However, there's this big lucrative market over here we can go into and penetrate and make a lot of business out of that to get it going. That's kind of fine. So
can I put the counter argument?
Elon is? Yeah. Elon is not going for the home market. Elon is going first in the factory, and if it works well enough, then they'll try it in the home market. So it's a little bit different there, that he's not really going after that, but he's seeing that as a potential. And if you don't see that as a potential a decade from now, then you really are just going to be a niche player.
Yeah. But I was going to say that Bernd had the opposite statement, which was, he said, what fundamentally disruptive technology has ever gone into the enterprise market before the consumer market? And that was an interesting counter argument to that. So, I mean, them's fighting words, right?
Well, let's think about this for a second. You had the early days of the cell phones were really corporations were the only ones that could afford it because they were expensive and the size of them, but they had utility. They were willing to kind of pay that.
Yeah, I remember doctors and lawyers in particular.
Right. But then eventually you get the more professional version of it that could do email, and that was BlackBerry. And for the most part, BlackBerry, it was like defense contractors, government, stuff like that. I mean, it was just in there. It was just in there. And then the iPhone came out and they all laughed at it. I was like, oh, I went our keyboard and stuff like that.
Right.
BlackBerry they never made it successfully into the consumer market.
Yeah.
That was their demise, is that and all Apple had to do was go up into the government and some of the corporations. And then that was it for BlackBerry. They didn't make it on down. And so that could be the problem. If Bernd comes out with something that's really working in the home, he could scale it up to go into the factory or, to work at McDonald's. I mean, there's not a big difference between working in a home and working at McDonald's.
I mean, if you could cook a burger in your kitchen, you can do it at McDonald's.
Yeah. And there could be those things. So there could be a risk at thinking that you're not going to get there someday because it's going to be an important market at some point.
Right. So pretty interesting. I just love the fact that we've got so much of this going on. I love the fact I would say probably a lot of this kind of rivalry stuff is relatively friendly, but Brett is clearly prickled a little bit about the fact that he's like, wait a second, we spent a lot of time developing this waste and Atlas apparently copied them, although who knows, right? I mean, because clearly Atlas, they didn't develop Atlas in a month either, so that's been on the drawing board for a while.
Well, we never know, because remember, like 7 days later, someone came out with a clone of it. So evidently, it's pretty easy to build. And not only that, just the thing stood up just like it. I'm like, holy
did
cow.
it really? That's crazy.
Yeah. Did you see there was a video that went out yesterday?
Oh my gosh,
Robot Booster or something like that, and they kind of mocked the video. And they threw together one really quick that was able to rotate the same. It's not exactly the same kinematics in the legs, but pretty sure, because the legs come out straight like this in the joint rather than being deflected like that. But still, they were able to get the range of motion to bring it up, and then they twisted everything around.
Right. Wow.
I was kind of shocked to see someone was able to imitate it that quickly. At first, I thought, wait a minute, is this CGI? Someone's able to do it?
Jeez. I do want to point this out, though. I noticed this as we were talking, that, Tesla they put out a couple of Optimus walking videos, but not all that much since the release. And they've been kind of quiet, but just the really polished look of this bot is very impressive.
Yes.
I mean, this is the end of last year, right? Or was it early?
Yes. I think it was December. Yeah.
December 2023. Yeah. So this is 4 months ago, and this thing looks so much more polished than the other bots. Just in terms of like it's so what Elon said about the fact that they have an advantage in being able to hit volume production. This is an indication of the quality that they're able to produce already. That's impressive.
Now, the thing that the trick that Boston Dynamics is doing is that if you look at Optimus, you do have a vertical axis down for both legs and the hip. And it's just a question of the range of motion that you have there. And Boston Dynamics made sure it was really big. That's the thing that causes your knees to kind of go point out in or out. Right. Okay. Right. So I think that's like pronation and supination, going back and forth like that. And typically we only move it maybe plus or minus 30 degrees or 45 degrees if you really want to. And Boston Dynamics decided, let's give it like full range, maybe plus or minus 180 on that. Right. There's no reason why Optimus could not do that as well, except for maybe the cabling wraps up, and then you just have to change the cabling for that. And the same thing with the torso is they've got a vertical torso. There's no reason why they couldn't also spin that. I mean, they could spin it plus or minus 720 if they wanted to. The only reason you don't is, again, your cabling might kind of wind up doing something like that. They may have the ability, the head's a little bit different because you get the fabric on there and that might kind of twist up. You'd have to do a head a little bit different on that. But the idea that they could flip their legs around, in theory, they could do it. And the arm, the trick on the arm, actually, they can do it because it's the third axis in the shoulder. It has nothing to do with the upper part of the shoulder. It's the third axis. They could easily open that up also plus or minus 180 degrees. So you could do the same parlor trick if you wanted to with this and the other bots. There's really no reason. So there's nothing unique about the Boston Dynamics design. It was just the decision to make the range a bit bigger. Right.
And it was visually very impressive and quite creepy. So
yeah. It's and kind of curious that you can do something like that, and hey, why not? Boy, I'm trying to think. Is that so? Every week we're seeing more press announcements coming from the various companies, as well as like new ones showing up here and there. We will continue to see that. But I think going back to the earnings and how some of the other questions and answers relate to Optimus would go to FSD and the discussions and the progress that's going there. The first thing I noticed was like Elon's mood was not dour Elon like we sort of had in the last one, the disasters earnings call, where he seemed like to really be down. But this also wasn't the one that was like really jocular and joking around. This was the serious Elon, the CEO in charge of going on, really getting the facts out there and making sure that people sort of understood the things and laying it all in the lines of like, if you don't understand that we're an AI company, then sell the stock.
Yeah.
That is like very clear. It's like, this is our direction. And if you don't like it, then you've got the option. You can just leave. But if we're trying to lay it out and spell it out to you. But the important thing is that people behind him, they were very upbeat. Ashok and others, it's just like they're almost giddy about how the progress they're seeing and the confidence they have. They gave me more confidence in the robotaxi than Elon's presentation did, just because of that. And the other thing that it hit me really hard is that they talked about about a month or so ago that they were no longer compute constrained. And that's why suddenly V12 came out and then like version after version after version just started rolling out. Yeah. And that Elon mentioned that they have the equivalent of 35,000 H100s right now.
Which is
and at
crazy.
the end of the year, it's going to be 85,000. Okay.
Yeah.
So if they're already doing this with 35,000,
right, just
imagine what they're going to be able to do with 85,000. And I'm just talking about FSD, also talking about Optimus, because the breakthrough for FSD was end to end. The breakthrough for Optimus is end to end. They know how to do that. And it's the same thing. It's operating in the real world. Optimus is a little bit trickier because, as I've said before, FSD, the idea is not to interact with the world. With Optimus, it is. So it's slightly different. However, the way you train it is probably very similar. And then they just got the compute capacity. And that's why I think they're going to be getting ready to ramp up, because they can do so much training and simulation with FSD, but you still need the real world examples to ground everything.
Right.
And Optimus, you need to do the same thing. So it's just questions like, when are they going to get those 100 if they don't already have that 100, or when are they going to get that 1,000 to really start collecting the data? Because again, going back to that interview we had with Bernd. Yeah. You want to mention that, the 100 versus a million?
Yeah. In terms of the number of shots you need to learn it. So yes, this, and I brought up this slide from their presentation, from their deck. This is the Q1 earnings call deck. But Bernd said they've discovered that they can do it takes about 1 million shots. In other words, say like you wanted to pick up a glass over here, right? That, if you want to do that 1 million times in simulation or 100 times in real life. So that's the kind of orders of magnitude fewer shots. And of course you can combine those, because you could do 500,000 or 600,000 in virtual reality and then polish it and make it better with 10 examples in real life, so you can do it really, really fast. But basically, but this is the thing that's really amazing is this is AI training compute. And then if we, because Elon talked about doing inference on your car, but if we stacked on top of this the amount of compute that's available in all the Tesla vehicles, this thing would just like go, so they're not showing us that, but if they showed us that, it would just be kind of mind-blowing, the kind of compute power that is available throughout Tesla's ecosystem.
The fleet.
But I mean, look at this. It's just gone vertical. And at the same time, you can see why they've decided to release full self-driving 12. Because they finally have enough compute to eat the data, which brings us to, I think people had speculated that the reason they did this more than anything else was they just wanted a lot of people using it so they could suck down a lot of data. And this pretty much indicates like the time correlation between the two giant spikes happens at pretty much the same time.
Right. So, and they've accumulated an awful lot of data. Again, it seems that real world data acquisition almost starts to trump what's going on in the simulations, especially as the neural nets get better and better. That I think Bernd was saying they're getting close to like 1 shot, and eventually you want to get to just 0 shot. You just don't do it, and it does it because it just knows enough about what's going on. It's going to get it right the first time. And we're seeing it's not just him claiming that. It's not just us thinking it's going to. Look at these different graduate students around the country that are throwing these basically the same things together and getting these really crappy robot models to come over with really horrible grippers to do complex tasks and are saying, oh yeah, we train it like 50 or 100 times, and it's able to replicate these tasks pretty well. So you know, it's like, okay, fundamentally the architecture is there, and a lot of people know how to do this.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It seems like we're going to be there. And the thing is that, like, sometimes we think, oh, you know, a million iterations in a computer must be like a blink of an eye. It's like, you'd be surprised. It takes a little bit longer than that. And if it is a blink of an eye, it's because you are renting like a really huge server farm to do it. So it costs a certain amount of money. So there's both time and cost in there. And in the end, Bernd's seeing this, like, actually the time and the cost is better with the bot than it is actually doing it in simulation now. And that's a remarkable thing. And that tells you that they are getting ready to scale. He's got to felt that they needed the right model, the right hardware model to do it. Suzanne has said the same thing. We've heard the same thing from Brett. You know, it's just like, you talk to all of them, it's like, yeah, it's more or less just making sure we get the right model. And once we like that model, we're going to start building lots of copies of them. And then we're going to start training.
And let's also not forget, even if you can never get to 0 shot, which I think they might be able to, let's say it's 50 shot. Let's say it takes 50 times to learn something. The beauty of bots is, if Scott teaches his bot to crack an egg, and I teach it to like flip the egg, the two bots can transfer that knowledge to each other. So it's not like I have to then go and teach it 50 times to crack an egg, because it already knows. So, you know,
but let's look at another question. You teach the bot to fold t-shirts and to put them in the drawers in your house. Okay. So you go through the whole thing and it works. Okay. We bring it over to my house. My house is configured completely different. And my shirts collection and everything is completely different. The placement of where the washer and dryer is. And all I have to tell Optimus is, like, you know, go ahead, take them out of the dryer and fold them and put it over here in these drawers right here. This is where I want you. And it will do it 0 shot. Right. It should be, even though it's things are different, they're similar enough that it should be able to figure it out in 0 shot. In the worst case, it might be, okay, let me show you. I'm taking this out. I'm going to do that. And go, oh yeah, I learned that over at John's house. And then I'll go over and put it in this drawer. It's like, oh yeah, but John puts it over in this drawer. Okay. You prefer to have it there. Fine. Boom. And then that's it. So you do that. And maybe that's like a one shot kind of deal that you just show it once. And
again, it's always, you have to think about the data in the aggregate, because it's not just the two of us. It's going to get the data from 100,000 households. So it's going to know over the average of the households.
It's going to see so many kitchens, and it's going to see like kind of the best configurations for where the silverware and everything should be in a kitchen. And it may reorganize your kitchen a little bit in a way that you don't like, because it's going to decide this is a more efficient location for these things. And this is where they're going to go from now on. So you may end up seeing, because it's seen enough of those things, and you might have to say, no, I really want them over here because we're just that way.
Well, but we could take, you know, I could see a test in some period of time where, let's say that there's 100,000 of these bots out there, and you get a new bot and it's been trained on all these people, and you bring it into your kitchen and you say, which one is the silverware drawer in my kitchen? And see if it's, because I often go to other people's houses. I go to like Airbnb and stuff, and I'm constantly opening the drawers going, where the hell did they put their silverware?
Yeah, but what's worse is that when you go to Airbnb, they only have like 4 of everything. And so you use up everything, you put in the dishwasher, and then when you get ready to the dishwasher, you want a suggestion. So where did the plates go? And you open it up, it's like all these empty cabinets. You're like, oh no. It's like you just put it in the first place.
Exactly. It keeps getting rearranged all
the owner comes back like, oh, these people were crazy. Why are they putting them there? Don't they know this is where it's supposed to belong?
Exactly. So, but you know, this is the kind of stuff. Again, this is the reason why this is so complicated, and the reason why simulations don't work that well, because what are you going to do? Are you going to build a million different versions of a kitchen? That's crazy. That's going to take forever to do that. So it's not just the simulation run. It's building the physics engine that's adequate to making it simulate properly. It's building all of the assets, which is a crazy number of assets you've got to build. So yeah, you build a virtual kitchen.
Yeah, but you know what's going to be is all you know what IKEA just rents out their stores in the evening for these bots.
Damn,
because you've got so many different layouts of kitchens in there. You just like bring them on over. Or you know, Kitchens R Us or something like. There's so many places that they could go running through and then learn.
They can go to the Home Depot and look at all of the different washing machines and all. Or I mean, they could do a system where, you know, forget about this FSD free for a month. Maybe they'll give you the bot free for like a month. It's like, you get a bot. You want a bot? You get a bot. We'll give you a bot.
Exactly. That's
and
the
then
other
they
way.
just collect all the data from your house. It's like, that's what the sort of like Trojan horse is that it's
Mm-hmm.
doing. So speaking of data, because we've now gone to the consumer level of this, whereas businesses are like, don't want to give up my data. Consumers are usually like, if it's cheap, I'll give up my data. I don't care. So,
Right. Right.
Yeah.
If it's free, it's because I'm the product.
Exactly. So don't forget that when Tesla, even though Tesla's like offering you the full self-driving for free, you're the product now. So there you go. I think it's all to the good though, because we're going to end up with better and better full self-driving. All right. So, wow, we've talked about a bunch of things. You have anything else you want to bring up? Or?
I don't know. I mean, it's like, how's your FSD been doing? I've been having a lot of great intervention-free drives that are just so human-like. Courtesy. I mean, I'm just really surprised at how it makes openings for other cars to get in that are very natural, allowing pedestrians to cross in front without being rude or anything like that. Just and again, this is kind of helped my thesis is it really is an order of magnitude better than 11. And just about every issue that I had with 11 is gone. There's a few new issues, but I believe most of them are going to be fixed, and it's getting down to style points more than anything else. But I'm just trying to think of the last time I had to do anything of interest in that, the construction zone that I've been through many times. Usually I went through there with a lead vehicle, and then yesterday it was up again. I mean, one of the things, it'll be up there for like an hour or two, and was able to cycle completely through this thing without a lead vehicle. So we'll be seeing here when it cycles.
It'll recycle in just a sec. Yeah. But so this is cool. I mean, context where road structure, where it
I did not do anything. I just let it go.
Yeah.
And because it's done it so many times, I was just confident it would be able to do it, and it did. And it was going a reasonable speed. It wasn't going too fast. It wasn't going too slow or something like that. It was really going along at what it felt is good. And that's the thing I've noticed, is that it's really good at sort of sensing what is a reasonable speed for the conditions. And that when you have any sort of vulnerable road users, it will be extra cautious around them. So the street, when I come into my house, sometimes it's empty. Sometimes there are vehicles that are just parked all over the place. Sometimes there's another vehicle coming or not, or people walking or something. And it's treating those things perfectly now. It used to be have almost a one size fits all going down that street, and you were always kind of nervous and not sure what's going on. Now I've got incredible confidence because it's actually driving it the way I would drive it. And yesterday it came in, the street was mostly empty, except that for the first time I'd ever had like a car that was pulling out of a driveway kind of into it, and it naturally kept going without stopping because it saw it was all right. It didn't have to come to complete stop, and did that rather naturally. Then it picked up a little bit of velocity because there was nothing there. And then it quickly noticed, wait a minute, there's some people walking in the street down there, and it started to slow down way in advance, which is what I normally kind of do, because I just don't want to jam on the brakes. And then it came up to it at a comfortable speed. And with version 11, sometimes it would just hesitate and not want to go forwards. Like, oh, the people here, I'm not sure what to do. But it was just like, it's okay if I go a little bit. And of course, the people they could sense the car coming anyways, and they tend to drift also a little bit off, which is what people tend to do when they see the car. So it's almost like it's knowing how the people are going to react. It's knowing that it's not a permanent object there that's in the way or obstruction that's somehow going to clear. And if it doesn't, it will then do something else. Also got to go by a garbage truck yesterday, which was great. It was trash day, and a lane was blocked. It was in a curve, and there's some other cars coming in the way. And I was like, I wonder what's going to do it. I wonder what's going to do it. And it's like, whoop, went right around without any problem. Had another service vehicle that was partially blocking a lane that was just driving around, rather than freaking out, just kind of drifted on out and drifted back in the way it was supposed to. And it's like, wow, it just is really very human-like.
Yeah, it's getting, I have a huge regret that my USB stick had filled up just before this happened, but I pulled into my neighborhood, and just after the entrance to the neighborhood, there was a cement truck that was out in the street with like one of those things that pours the cement, and they were redoing their driveway. And then there was a big pickup truck parked directly across the street from them, because the workers are idiots. So, and there was a tiny little narrow path, but it was way over on the other side, and a car was coming towards me at the same time, like opposite direction. And the car negotiated that. It went out, and it had confidence. It saw that the other guy was slowing down and stopped, and then it went through it. It was just, And I was like, yes, yes, yes. And then I went home and like my USB thing had stopped like 5 minutes before that. I was like,
I had that too happen once on a couple of drives. Like, darn it. So I've learned to clear it out to make sure I have it.
Well, Tesla, for goodness sake, just cycle the memory. Like when the old stuff is old.
They do. The thing is that you're doing all these, you do too many save clips.
I think it must have been what it was.
Yeah. See, I kept on saving and saving, and then eventually it's like, we can't save anything anymore. So I've gone through.
I know. I was just super bummed. I was just like, no. Anyway, but it's just like, that is incredibly impressive stuff, because this is really not easy. And it also gives me great confidence for the humanoid bots. We have yet to see how the likes of Agility or Figure or Aptronic or any of these guys are going to handle very complex edge case scenarios, when I have a great deal of confidence that Tesla will be able to do that, because the roots of this system are the same as full self-driving. And I already have a great deal of confidence in full self-driving. So, you can, I'm not saying the other guys can't do it, but
I would say that, that gives me a lot of confidence in Optimus, because they already have experience of really getting something out there. And I believe it's going to be almost the same foundation. So either it's the seeds of their success or the seeds of their failure, because it turns out that it's like the wrong model. It's kind of like completely, but I don't think so. I mean, I would say it's like 99% that this is pretty much a similar kind of approach that you take to the humanoid bots, because there's just so much similarities between the two.
Right. Well, and they told us explicitly back in AI Day 2022, way back then, hey, by the way, Tesla, we need another AI Day. But also just a real quick thank you to Tesla for having a Shuck on the Q1 earnings call. I don't know that had ever happened before.
Oh, that's right. You don't normally not on there. There's no reason for him to be there.
That was like, I was geeking out about that. I was like, I can't believe he's on the earnings call. This is the coolest thing ever. So it shows the direction of their thinking. You know, it's like, Elon said that we're not a car company, we're an AI company. And they explicitly had the lead, the AI lead from Tesla. I can never remember his title, but anyway, the guy. So, I think that was putting your money where your mouth is. They're like, yeah, he's here to answer questions. And so that was really cool. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, cool. Well, we covered a lot. Let us know what you think in the comments. And in the meantime, if you want to catch us live very, very soon, next weekend on May the 4th be with you, we will be up in Michigan, in the Detroit area at Monroe Live's explore past teardowns, get an exclusive behind the scenes look at our ongoing Cybertruck teardown. It's going to be awesome. So if you're up there, definitely say hi.
It's open to the public. You can go to a link to find out there, and we should be there for, I think it starts at 1:00 on Saturday. Yeah. May the 4th. And then I have to ask you a question, John. Do you know what comes 2 days after May the 4th?
May the 6th. I don't know.
May the 6th.
Oh, I should have known. Okay, we get one for in and one for out. So there we go. Right. On that note, we'll say goodbye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.